ProAves. Next on ProAves. ProAves is a Colombian NGO that's protecting some of the most endangered species and ecosystems within the country. ProAves originally was founded in 1998 to save the yellow-eared parrot, a species that was thought to be extinct and got rediscovered by us. And throughout our habitat protection and persistence, this species still flying out today. We currently have about 27 nature reserves across Colombia. We are protecting endangered species alike, but also in endangered of habitats like cloud forest, lowland forest, and paramo. But we also primarily are more specialized on endangered species itself. Every reserve itself is protecting a certain species that can be found within the area, and we try to focus mostly on birds, but we also have our reserves focusing on mammals and amphibians. Each reserve is designated for species, for instance, like the critical endangered blue-billed curassow. But also we work with different local communities and facilitate ecotourism. One of the most important examples for that is El Dorado Reserve in Santa Marta, where we protect the Santa Marta parakeets. Our work is quite straightforward. Mostly are focusing protecting and securing land, restoring habitat, supporting rangers, teams, and ensuring permanent protection of these areas. But I'm fortunate to regularly visit the field and staying connected with this landscape, and where we've basically all fighting for. If you really would like to support a real on-the-ground conservation organization, please follow us, or feel free to donate to us in the links we briefly will exchange with you. Every hectare that protecting has a lasting impact. So thank you for being part of the effort.
Hello, and welcome back to Store Impact Podcast. Me, your host, Jack Cole. So today, I'm joined by Lex Plasman, who's from the Netherlands, but he's been spending plenty of time in Colombia. So first of all, Lex, thank you so much for your time, and start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in Colombia.
Originally, I'm from the Netherlands, as you mentioned before. I'm studied biology and tropical ecology, and eventually in the Netherlands. And for part of my studies, before I studied, I had a brief volunteering work with a British volunteering organization, and basically ended up in Ecuador and part of an expedition where we did biodiversity monitoring, and basically from there on I got hooked on tropical ecology and all the works and the biodiversity of the neotropics in general. So basically from there on I decided to study tropical first biology, and then later on I specialized more in tropical ecology, and then basically returned to Ecuador again during my first experience in South America. Basically, I first Ecuador, but I wanted to see a little bit more beyond. So back at the time, 2012 was that, or presumably, I crossed the border with Colombia. It was probably a little bit more dangerous because that was still in the height of the conflict years, basically. But I wanted to get more. So basically, from there on, I tried to find an internship in Colombia, but I didn't find it. But in the end, I found something again in Ecuador, and from Ecuador, then basically got some more into extensive traveling after my internship, and then from there on, with my contacts, I found an organization where I could do my thesis eventually in Colombia. So that was pretty great.
Fantastic.
And then from there on, I graduated just in the middle of the pandemic. So unfortunately, I was forced to stay in Europe. But from there, after the pandemic lost, I decided to move to Colombia, and where I basically eventually applied for different NGOs and different kind of organizations, and that's how basically I turned out to become part of the ProAves team.
Brilliant. And that leads on very nicely to what is ProAves and how did it begin?
Basically, ProAves is an Colombian NGO that mostly focuses on biodiversity protection within the Colombian territory. ProAves is mostly been focused on endangered species of birds, but we focus a lot more on general biodiversity, like for instance amphibians and mammals, all that is endangered, but also ecosystems. We have a total of 27 private national reserves within the Colombian territory. It's almost, what I can recall, is almost 30,000 hectares of different ecosystems we protect within the country. Originally, we started out in 1998, where we protected the yellow-eared parrot, or basically it was a species that was presumed to be extinct. And our organization basically organized expeditions to re-find populations again, and rediscovered it eventually also. And then from there on, we started to protect the habitat and working to get towards with the community to protect these areas where the remnants of this species was be found. And then from there on, there was a great success, a big media campaign, and from now on, it used to be critically endangered, and then from now it can be found as a vulnerable species. And in general, what we do besides now as an NGO, we mostly work in different areas that are probably at the height of the conflict when Colombia was still in fighting. The areas were very difficult to work to, but that is when mostly was a double-edged sword where where the areas was protected and we could manage the different areas. Of course, now it's that evolved over the time as well. And then from there on, we developed also different pillars, like more scientifically based. Also, we facilitate ecotourism. So, like for instance, tourists from abroad or from Colombia can visit the reserves and see this incredible biodiversity. And yeah, that's
Brilliant.
basically in a nutshell what ProAves is.
That's an excellent overview. Thank you. Okay, so naturally, lots of conservation organizations dotted all over the place doing different kinds of work. What makes ProAves a little bit different to some other groups out there?
Majority because we are an NGO. Mostly the NGOs in general, they don't really have like this big network of protected areas. Mostly that's been done by here, at least here in Colombia. I'm not sure if it's maybe elsewhere, it could be different, but mostly we have like this huge network of different reserves and different areas where we can facilitate people like students or other things to study this incredible biodiversity. And we basically started out from 1998, and from there, so we have already more than 27 years of experience in the conservation fields, working with communities, and as I mentioned before, um, working more toward in different aspects of the conservation job, basically in general.
Brilliant. Okay. So, what are the current projects? So, you've given us an outline of the areas and some of the species, or the number of species. So, they're working with communities. So, specifically, what are some of the projects that you were involved with and some of the initiatives that you're currently working on?
At the moment, one of the most important campaigns, like what we did with the yellow parrot back in the day when we started. Now we have another focal species. It's called the blue-billed curassow. It's a critically endangered species, and an endemic species can only find here in the north and middle part of Colombia. And we have a reserve in Puerto Berrio, that's in the middle Magdalena Valley, one of the highest deforestation rates within the country, and the species in general has lost almost like 98% of its former habitat. So we currently are advocating and working with also together with other NGOs and stakeholders within Colombia to preserve the species and try to get its conservation status up, and working more together with different international NGOs as well to get funding and to get more the species more under the attention that it deserves. But besides, on a daily basis, I write proposals. I need to do working with different other international NGOs. And as you probably understand, Colombia is in general English speakers, it's a bit difficult to find. So mostly what I involve is to try to do translation work and writing the proposal um, stuff. But we were more, but in that way, we always looking forward to expand our reserves, looking for funding or for other ways to restore degraded lands and strengthen our field presence basically within the reserves where we are currently are. And yeah, that's mostly what we currently do.
And speaking a little bit more broadly, what have you noticed, or what, particularly since years of the conflict, what have you noticed as a society in terms of the direction of conservation in Colombia? Do you think people are taking more notice? People are taking it more seriously? The government's making it a priority, or not, perhaps? What do you notice there in Colombia? What's happening?
And at the moment, so there is a lot of attention. A lot of people. It's yeah. People. Majority of the Colombians when we started out weren't that very aware about the high diversity, and they didn't. Of course, when we shared it with the local people and tried to also with our rangers, they get more aware how extraordinary it is to have such amount of biodiversity and different species within Colombia itself. So in a lot of ways, um, Colombia is yeah, it's basically waking up again more, and it's also selling it more because since the conflict, it was basically a no-go area because most of the people there, Colombia had a very bad reputation. It was very people didn't bother to go to visit a country like that. But since the peace agreements and everything is getting a little bit more the attention. So we also get more tourism. We get more people coming around, and also a lot of more positive view of Colombian people and the nature perception and conservation of the works itself. But unfortunately, with the peace agreement, there's also other actors coming in and having like deforestation is getting a lot more quicker because there's less boundaries. Before there were guerrilla fighters that basically uh, protected, was a double-edged sword. Maybe they protected the land and nobody wanted to get in, but now in the other sense, now actors can get in, and you see on those industries and other ways that they that there's more destruction and there's more need for conservation in that way.
All right, sorry, just a bit of a technical issue there. So you just, yeah, back to the question. So tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day life, Max.
So in general, as a foreigner working here in Colombia, of course, it's I'm more involved within the administration part. I'm working more in an office job. In that way, it's not very different in comparison if you have a job maybe in Europe or in America. But in other ways, I work a lot with the planning. I'm working with our directory more to get conservation projects started. Working, writing proposals, meeting with donors, speaking with donors. In that way, mostly I work also with making the logical framework for finance proposals or for engaging with the public in general, because I'm doing a lot of also translations. So most of it is that's my job. Unfortunately, I can't get to the field every day, but every once in a while I have the privilege to visit the field as well, because in that way it's very important to stay connected with the field where we're protecting, and we try to write as much as logical on paper what we could do. And most of the time I'm just also coordinating, working with what the things, coordinating what's needed in the from the fields, and what can we help out for, where can we where could we have a higher impact in comparison with with the rest of the organization itself.
Brilliant. Sound quite happy out there in Colombia. How's the food?
Great, awesome. That's one of the luxuries we have here. Like the food is one of the most amazing. Our main office is in Antioquia. So here the food in general is like beans, very. Every region has its own different gastronomy and in its own right. It's worthwhile to visiting and eating. So yeah.
And what are some of the main dishes from your region?
From our region, they call it here frijoles. It's like
Oh,
the
beans.
beans, the bandeja paisa. That's the most famous plate you can find within Colombia. It's a huge plate. Basically, it's with with different kind of meats, with starches, and it's yeah. Basically, if you have that, you can have that the entire day, so you don't have to eat anymore. That's originally apparently how it started as well. Meaning the coffee farmers, they basically they need to bring their harvest to the market, so they had a huge plate, so they didn't have to bother to find lunch or somewhere else. So basically that's how it started. But I'm a 1 meter 80, so I have a good appetite. So most of the time, in comparison with the rest of Colombians, I'm very fond for the Colombian food, and I wouldn't return to a European diet anymore.
Bit spoiled. Okay, so yeah, so just cycling back a little bit to ProAves more specifically. Tell us a little bit why. It's an obvious question, but tell us a bit why people should care about the work that you're involved with.
Because in mostly because this loss of of the nature and in the biodiversity in general is irreversible. If once a species is no longer within the area, it can have replications that can affect our daily lives as well. Look what happens with COVID. In a way, that house of us was involved with animals or in that way. So if we wouldn't care for our environment, those kind of pandemics or natural disasters would become more frequently. And if we wouldn't prevent those kind of actions in the future, perfecting ecosystems and wildlife and water security would even make it even more difficult. So if we take action right now, um, that would make the job make it a little bit less difficult for the future to protecting these areas and also enjoying for those communities, because many of those communities, they are highly dependable or are very impoverished, or so that would could also be a stimulus if we would highlight those different areas.
Finally, Lex, where can our audience find you to get involved, to donate, or to generally support your work?
In general, we have a website that's bilingual. It's in Spanish and in English. We also are. You can find us on different social media, for instance, Instagram. Also on LinkedIn. We can find us on. We have a Flickr where we every once in a while we put photos. Facebook, all those things. We also have a YouTube channel. And if you really like to donate on one of our projects, we work together with an organization called Conservation Allies. That's a US based organization that basically helps us to find donors from abroad. Because in general, if you want to donate directly to Colombia, that's due to our banking system and due to the conflict here is a bit difficult. So we recommend to do it to a third party, basically, and then in that way we can have justify our means and have a great impact.